All right, hey guys, thanks for joining us. It's our first video, and uh, it's Bones and Floyd. And I think for this video, we thought maybe if we share our stories, kind of the journey that we've been in, and I think as we share our stories, you guys will see you know, how the whole faith reimagined concept comes into play. So our stories will kind of give you an understanding and a clarity on what we on and what we're saying. And so yeah, we'll spend some time just talking about our stories and yeah, just where we at now and how we got to where we at. So yeah, maybe Floyd, we can start by just sharing briefly about your background, where you're from, and what are some of the values growing up that have shaped who you are.
Yeah, I would say being, I grew up in different places in the city, as well as in a remote area like a village, and I had a bit of exposure to the township life. So I lost my parents at a young age, and then I think through that I had to do a lot of moving around, and I left the city to go stay with my grandma. So through that, I realized that actually in the village, people were very communal in how they did life. So that saying that it takes a village to raise a child. I think for me, it says a lot into my personal experience and my upbringing because that's how I was raised. There wasn't appointments that I need to make to go see my friends or my neighbors. The door was always open. If there wasn't food, the door was always open. Hospitality was just something that was normal, and community was more emphasized. So if I was walking on the street and I did something wrong, any parent could discipline me. I didn't have that big of a right to be disobedient in community because it felt as if I wasn't only shaming my family, but I was shaming parents overall as a communal aspect to it. So I think high level that was my upbringing. So growing up, I normalized friendships. The way I built values or friends was based on that framework. It's like we look after each other, and we real with each other as well. As brothers and sisters, it was similar to my own siblings. That's how I pretty much was raised, and
Mhm.
I've learned that at a young age and grew up with it pretty much till today.
Yeah,
But what about you, Bong? How has
yeah,
yours been?
yeah. No, that's good. I think similar to you. So I'm from a township as well, and some of the values that you're touching on, the communal aspect of living, I think definitely shaped me hugely as well growing up. I remember my grandmother was big, just was big on that, just thoughtfulness towards your neighbors and just the community, at large. So I think for me, I grew up, really thinking, my identity formation is not separate from my communal identity. Who am I was largely influenced and related to, who's my community and
Yeah,
how is my community. And so, yeah, I mean, that played a huge role as well. Even coming to study at VETS, my understanding was, I'm gonna graduate and get a job. Yes, do well for myself, but majority of it was, man, I want to empower my family and my
mm,
community. So my success was also related to, the success of the community or the success of people around me. So yeah, man, I think similar to you, very, very communal. And so,
mm,
see, with that, there's the faith component now. You grow up in that
yeah,
context. You come into the city for studies,
yeah,
and then there's a spiritual formation there taking place. So
Wow.
how was that for you?
Yeah, I think coming in first year, I mean, there's a sense of freedom that you sort of get. I think it was my first experience of experiencing independence, or having me as a person be more important than anyone else.
Mm,
So for the first time, I experienced that in my first year. So I think I just was in an identity crisis now. All of a sudden, of trying to figure out who I was. And I mean, met in some of the guys who were already Christian at the time. We journeyed together through like we started friendship, and I think somewhere in there, I mean, their lifestyles was attractive, and I mean, it was a good brotherhood system that they kind of had.
mm,
And I mean, through that, man, through experiencing the authenticity of their hospitality, I was like, man, this is good. I want this for myself. So it's around. It was a journey that led me to realize that, man, I wanted what they had, and that's when I became a Christian.
mm,
And man, my life obviously looked different now. I was now being trained, being developed, being mentored into understanding what does it mean to be a Christian, all the ins and outs. So I mean, it was an exciting time. I would say it was an exciting time because it was also part of my identity formation. That now knowing that I'm a child of God. What does that mean? And also, it
mm,
was interesting just realizing that even being a child of God, you're introduced to a new community. It
mm,
wasn't My independence still wasn't, that much big of a deal because I was now with fellow Christians who we journeyed together with. So I think that was the basis, or just the basics of my faith formation. And obviously, things got a bit different as you grow, as my understanding of who God was changed, developed rather. Things start getting a bit, looking a bit more differently as to understanding what it means to be a South African young man, be black, and be a Christian as well.
mm.
So I'd say that was my Christian formation, or my faith formation. But what about you, Bongs? Can you share a bit with us as well?
Yeah. So for me, I came to faith my last year of high school. I think, yeah, just being a young boy in high school, I think wrestling with a lot of things. I think at the time, just questions about just my past and some of the trauma and the pain that I've experienced, and yeah, just understanding, what's the point of it all, what's the purpose of it, wrestling through identity and purpose. And so,
Mm,
yeah, God used a radio station for me, to, yeah, man, to make me, see Him, open my eyes. And so
mhm,
I gave my life to Jesus during that time. And then the following year, that's when I went into the city, the university space, I think similar to you. Just the new community that I had found. So coming into university for me was I had a strong desire, man, to have men and women around me who were also on the same faith and same journey that were going to help me grow in this faith and help me understand God, better. And I'd found that new community, um, and yeah, and really similar to you, the trainings
mm,
that provided development, and yeah, I grew in a drastic way.
mm,
But as I was, I think as years went, I'm into
mm.
this new community. It's a new culture compared to where I was coming from.
Yeah.
I began to I think I began to see this tension in me, um, almost like a disconnect, right? A
Yeah.
disconnect from the world I had come from, to the world that I was in now. And as time went by as well, I saw the disconnect even,
Mm,
between me and my family, right? Those who I grew up with. Yeah, so that's when, okay, what is happening here? And I think maybe we can chat a little bit about it. FISMAS 4, FISMAS 4 was a huge turnaround, I think, for
Yeah.
me as a Christian,
Mm,
because, yeah, for the first time, I was like, okay, this thing is happening, and
mm,
Christians around me have a different view about it, right? Churches have a
mm,
different view about it, or some churches are just silent. They were not even engaging the issue. And so it made me really wonder and question. I mean, if we don't see eye to eye on this issue, um, what more are we not seeing eye to eye,
mm,
concerning the faith and God, and how we should see these things in the culture. And so that began a disconnect, I think,
mm,
in me, and just this questioning of, what do I really believe in? What does God have to say about these things? Um,
mm. Can you just continue explaining more as to where you are or how you got to where you are now in your spiritual journey in light of what happened with Fismas Fall and thereafter?
Yeah, I think for me, what Fismas 4 did was I started digging deep, as I was saying, like what more, right, do we like, yeah, not just see eye to eye on. And so I started digging more, and yeah, I started realizing that for the most part, being in the city, my my theology or my understanding of God and what God cares about was largely influenced by the Western world. Um,
Mm,
and yeah, I began to see that even in my life, and yeah, it just made me, man, wonder and doubt, and be like, I want, I want to reconcile it. How do I reconcile my faith,
mm,
with what God says who He is in the Bible? And so, yeah, I started seeing even like how my faith was not helping me answer some of the questions that my context was
mm,
wrestling with. Like I didn't have a view on how should Christians deal with witchcraft, how should we deal with ancestral worship, you
mm,
know, how should we deal with unemployment, poverty, and social injustices and economic disparities. So
mm,
all those issues were things that, largely people that come from the context I grew up with wrestle with,
mm,
and I realized that I didn't have answers, man. I did not
mm,
know how to handle God's word
mm,
with those issues. And so that's when I saw, man, it's not helpful that my faith is largely influenced
mm,
by the Western culture, because it's really not helping me or training me or equipping me to answer
mm,
some of the questions that my context is asking. And so,
mm,
yeah, and then that's when I think I dived into the other narrative that maybe you can speak into. Yeah, just the fact that there is no one, because I used to think being Christian is this way,
mm,
which unfortunately the Western culture has dominated that space, though. It
mm,
has dictated what it means to be a person of faith and
mm,
what it looks like to live like a
mm,
Christian.
mm.
Yeah,
That's good, man. That's good. I
yeah.
think on my side, I could allude a lot of what you said. I mean, I think just I mean, growing up, I mean, what we knew, or I think what's common about African cultures is that there's no question as to a high regard of a supreme God or this higher God or higher
Mm,
authority that is out there in the spiritual realm. We know that it's the question of how we get there that
mm,
is in question often in cultures and in tribes. But also, what I realized apart, like the narrative you mentioned about just the Western influence, like the passion of Christ. Um, I think I mean, the first time I had an experience with that was in Sunday school when I was growing up, and Um, from there on, I really was convinced that Jesus was a European dude.
Mm,
And so was John and all these apostles that were there in that story. I really were convinced that Mary was Caucasian in color. And I mean, I think growing up for me, just coming back to just where I am now, growing up for me, I mean, I didn't really have a strong experience of racism, or
mhm,
maybe let me just say I was uh, ignorant, or what I would call in today's world colorblind. But even that colorblind, for me, it was like, oh no, I think it's much better to be a Caucasian person than being a black person. I didn't
yeah,
say that outwardly. I didn't say that outwardly, but I think I believe that to a certain degree, and when I looked at the figures of faith, it affirmed that belief. You know what I
mm,
mean? So only when I became a Christian, and like you mentioned with Christmas fall happening, that I realized I'm like, wait a minute. So there is a difference. There is a difference between
yeah,
who I am and who I thought that Jesus looked like. And I think that um, for me was in question as well. To say, man, you know what? Actually, the Bible has the same story
mm,
of Jesus Christ. However, where we have done an injustice as a people, like throughout the world, is we have put on paintings of Jesus that assumes that he comes from
mm,
a certain place in which he doesn't really come from. And I
yeah,
think uh, and I think that was the unfortunate part in which we still teach people today, or even young people today, when they look at the movie scenario. I mean, Hollywood. Who influences Hollywood? Who has the money to influence Hollywood? We know who it is. So
mm,
I think for us, for me and newborns, it's just coming from a similar journey. It's just coming to a point where we're like, wait a minute, actually, what has God said to the African people
yeah,
in that context? And I mean, we convinced He made all people, He made us as well. And there's a
mm,
way in which He communicates to us. It's through His word, but also saying, can we reimagine a different narrative of how the same gospel restores families in Africa in a way which it would look different, explained in China or in America, and
yeah,
saying that's what we have a heart for, man. We want to create a new narrative of new stories
yeah,
that people would actually see that the Bible actually does talk about witchcraft. The Bible does talk about issues
mm,
of worship. The Bible does talk about unemployment and issues of social justice. Um, the person of God is for all of those things because it's for him. At the end of it, we believe in Christ because we believe that he's the ultimate authority and he is just and is merciful and is renewing. So
yeah,
if he has all of those powers, I think we're convinced that he has a say in these things, and we have seen it in scriptures and saying we wanna dive in, and that's what we're inviting everyone to dive in with us as we reimagine how actually we
mm,
could be telling the stories better.
yeah. No, that's good, but I think as you were saying, just the concept of faith being reimagined. I think yeah, man, we're trying to bring that balance in the story, right? In the whole narrative of what God is doing in the world. I think as I was saying, the world has taught us, right? We've been all socialized to think that this dominant narrative that we all live in is the only way, right?
Mm,
When you think of church history, we always
mm,
think the church fathers that are presented to us, which white males, are their stories and their experiences are the only way that God has moved, in
mm,
the world and worked. And so we are saying, that is not true. That is one-sided. There's another narrative. There's another story, right? And experiences of people of different ethnicities and cultures
mm,
that
mm,
have experienced God, and God has used them in history,
mm,
to accomplish His work and His mission. And so we want to
mm,
bring that to the table. Say, hey,
mm,
consider this narrative as well. This is, I mean, God is big, right? The kingdom is big. Let's not just limit it, to this one, narrative. And as you were saying, I love it. God's word actually gives us that, right? It opens
mm,
the scope of,
mm,
man, this narrative is just big. And so,
that's
yeah,
it,
that's
yeah.
that's where we at, man. And I think as you guys journey with us, you hear. I mean, there's a lot of learning that's happening. We uncovering a lot of things,
Mm,
and at the same time, we're letting go of a lot of things, right? I think
yeah.
for me, it has meant letting go of some, doctrines, or Christian ways of understanding the Bible, and that I've thought of, I've gone on to believe for so long that if I don't see it this way, if I don't hold on, to
Mm,
this doctrine, then I'm not a Christian or a
mm,
maturing Christian, whatever that is. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a letting go of so many things, and um, taking on, and holding on to, what actually the Bible is saying about these things. And so,
that's good. That's
yeah,
good, man.
I think I'm excited for people, man, to join us in the journey. So, all right, guys, that's it for this video. So feel free, if you wanna, leave your comment, or if you wanna, ask something for clarity. I think feel free to do that. We're more than willing to engage with you guys. And yeah, stay tuned. We'll be starting
Yeah.
a series as well. So that's coming soon. Yeah, stay tuned for that. I don't know, Fred, if
Good.
you have closing comments or
Yeah, man, that's good, Bongs. I think you've said it all, man. Just want to reassure the listeners that we're not making these things up. That that man, we're excited that I mean God empowers us to do this, man, and that it
yeah,
could be a narrative for the next generations to come. So, yeah,
yeah.
definitely. We'll be in touch soon, man.
Cheers, bro.
Cheers, man.